Rain hammered against the armored hull of Engine 51 as it rolled through the neon-lit streets of Kingsport. Steam hissed from the wheel wells while emergency strobes painted the wet pavement red and blue. The massive vehicle looked more military than civilian, six-wheeled and plated in ceramic armor, thick enough to stop rifle rounds. Inside the cab, the crew sat in exhausted silence. Their first major call together had nearly killed 3 refinery workers and leveled an entire industrial block. Richard Hale still smelled burning chemicals inside the filters of his turnout mask. Captain Arrron Rourke sat up front, reviewing incident footage through his retinal display, while Atlas 51 quietly processed reports through the truck's integrated systems. Structural collapse probability exceeded projections by 31%, Atlas stated calmly through the cabin speakers. Civilian survival rate improved due to Lieutenant Hale's rapid intervention. Richard leaned back against the reinforced seat. "Tell the report I got lucky." "Statement inaccurate," Atlas replied. A few chuckles rolled through the cabin. Across from him, firefighter Luis Ortega shook his head. "You dragged 2 people through a wall of fire while carrying a thermal lance. That wasn't luck." "Marine reflexes," another firefighter muttered. Richard didn't answer. He stared out the armored side window at the rain. The city lights blurred together into streaks of gold and crimson. He had spent most of his adult life inside combat dropships, armored personnel carriers, and exo-frame deployment racks. He knew how to advance through gunfire. He knew how to kill. Saving people still felt unfamiliar. The truck descended into the underground vehicle lift beneath Station 51. Massive blast doors opened ahead of them. The mech bay waited below. The cavernous chamber glowed with industrial floodlights and holographic maintenance displays. Towering exo-frames stood in magnetic suspension cradles while drones buzzed overhead carrying tools and replacement armor plates. Hydraulic arms rotated slowly from the ceiling like the limbs of some enormous mechanical spider. Richard stepped from the engine beside the others, pulling off his gloves. That was when he heard Jim Marshall yell from across the bay. "Marine!" Richard sighed quietly. Jim marched toward him, holding a data slate and grease-stained diagnostic gloves. Station 51's senior exo-frame technician looked perpetually irritated at the universe. "You survived your first run." "Barely." "Good." Jim shoved the slate into Richard's chest. "That means the machine survived too." Richard glanced down at the display. "Training exercise. Live system calibration." He looked back up. "You serious? Your handling metrics are abnormal." "That sounds bad. It means you're either gifted or dangerous. I haven't decided which." Several firefighters nearby grinned. Jim pointed toward the far end of the bay. Richard's exo-frame stood waiting. The machine was enormous up close. Nearly 11 feet tall in standby mode, the exo-frame fire suppression rig resembled a fusion of industrial loader and military assault platform. Heavy white and red armor plating covered the torso while hydraulic bundles ran along reinforced limbs like exposed muscle. The Crown Emergency Services crest gleamed across the chest. Richard approached slowly. The machine woke as he neared. Blue optic sensors flickered alive. "Pilot recognized," the onboard AI announced. "Lieutenant Richard Hale authorization confirmed." The chest assembly unfolded open with a hiss of pressure seals. Richard climbed inside. The cockpit wrapped around him like a second skeleton. Neural sync lines attached along his forearms and spine, while the frame's control harness locked into place. Instantly the machine moved with him. Not delayed, not mechanical, natural. Jim's voice echoed through external speakers. "Today's exercise is simple. We test attachments, movement precision, rescue operations, and heat resistance." Richard flexed the rig's massive fingers. Servo motors purred smoothly. "Simple," he muttered. The bay floor shifted. Training barriers rose from hidden compartments while holographic flames erupted across simulated corridors. A drone projected collapsing debris patterns overhead. Atlas 51's voice joined the simulation. "Scenario loaded. Industrial transit tunnel collapse with trapped civilians." Richard rolled his shoulders. The mech responded perfectly. Then he moved. The entire crew went quiet. Most firefighters piloted exo-frames carefully, almost cautiously. The machines were heavy and expensive. Richard moved like the frame weighed nothing. The exo-frame sprinted across the bay with shocking speed. Hydraulics thundered. The massive machine vaulted over fallen debris and landed in a controlled kneel beside a simulated casualty marker. Jim blinked at his monitor. "Okay," he muttered. Richard activated the frame's rescue arms. Smaller articulated manipulators unfolded beneath the primary gauntlets, designed for delicate extraction work. The massive combat-capable hands suddenly operated with surgical precision. The rig lifted crushed steel beams without disturbing the victim marker beneath. "Pressure balance stable," Atlas reported. Richard pivoted smoothly and deployed the thermal suppression cannon mounted over the shoulder. A stream of blue-white suppressant foam blasted across the burning corridor simulation. Steam exploded through the bay. Several rookies stared openly now. "Hell," Ortega whispered. "He runs it like combat armor." Because it was combat armor once. Richard saw it immediately. Different shell, different colors, same bones underneath. Richard activated the frame's rescue arms. Smaller articulated manipulators unfolded beneath the primary gauntlets, designed for delicate extraction work. The massive combat-capable hands suddenly operated with surgical precision. The rig lifted crushed steel beams without disturbing the victim marker beneath. "Pressure balance stable," Atlas reported. Richard pivoted smoothly and deployed the thermal suppression cannon mounted over the shoulder. A stream of blue-white suppressant foam blasted across the burning corridor simulation. Steam exploded through the bay. Several rookies stared openly now. "Hell," Ortega whispered. "He runs it like combat armor." Because it was combat armor once. Richard saw it immediately. Different shell, different colors, same bones underneath. Quiz, Kexex. The Crown Emergency Services rigs were descendants of military exo-frames. The Empire pretended otherwise for public relations, but veterans always recognized the truth. These machines were built first for war. Now they saved lives. Jim activated the next phase. Warning sirens erupted. Multiple structural failures detected. Heavy steel slabs crashed down around Richard. Without hesitation, he triggered the rig's stabilization anchors. Massive spikes fired from the frame's legs into the deck plating. The Atlas rig caught an entire collapsing wall section with both arms. Hydraulics screamed. The mech bay floor groaned beneath the weight. Richard gritted his teeth inside the cockpit as warning lights flashed red across the HUD. Load limit exceeded. He adjusted stance automatically. Military instinct, distribute weight, control breathing, maintain centerline. The wall stabilized. Everyone in the bay stared. Even Jim looked impressed now. "Atlas," Richard said calmly. "Run auxiliary power through left hip actuators." Confirmed. The frame compensated instantly. Richard rotated the wall section aside with careful precision and lowered it safely to the ground. Silence. Then slow applause started somewhere behind the observation railing. More joined in. Jim crossed his arms. "I hate natural talent." Richard climbed from the cockpit as the chest assembly opened again. Sweat soaked through the underlayer beneath his turnout gear. Jim stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've done this before. Not this exact model. That's not what I meant." Richard looked towards the towering rig. Its optic sensors still glowed softly in standby. Finally, he answered. "In the Marines, we used siege frames during urban pacification operations." The bay quieted slightly at the word pacification. Everyone knew what that meant. The Royal Marines ended wars, brutally. "You ever kill someone in one?" a rookie asked before immediately regretting it. Richard looked at him. Not angry, just tired. "Yes." Nobody spoke. Rain hammered faintly against the distant upper levels of the station. Then Captain Vance stepped forward. "And now he uses those skills to pull civilians from burning buildings." She looked around the bay. "That matters?" Richard said nothing. Jim cleared his throat awkwardly and tapped the data slate. "Well, mechanically speaking, your synchronization rating is the highest I've seen outside military testing programs." "That good?" "That terrifying." A few laughs broke the tension. Jim pointed towards the attachment racks lining the wall. Rows of specialized equipment waited in illuminated storage cradles. Thermal cutters, rescue claws, heavy foam cannons, magnetic lift arrays, portable shield generators, drone deployment pods, high-pressure water accelerators capable of punching through concrete. "This rig can mount over 40 mission configurations," Jim explained. "Urban rescue, wildfire suppression, hazardous material containment, flood response, riot extraction." "Riot extraction?" Richard asked. Jim hesitated. "Crown says firefighters save everyone." Richard studied the equipment racks quietly. Military hardware wearing rescue colors. Same Empire, different mission. Atlas 51 spoke softly through the bay speakers. "Lieutenant Hale." Richard looked up. "Your biometric stra." Your biometric stress indicators have decreased 17% since assignment to Station 51. The crew exchanged glances. Atlas continued. Psychological stabilization appears linked to operational rescue activity. Richard exhaled slowly. The AI was probably right. For years he had only known destruction. Now every life saved felt like balancing a scale he could never fully repay. Captain Vance walked beside him towards the observation deck. "You handled yourself well today." Richard smirked faintly. "You mean I didn't break the expensive equipment?" "That too." They stopped overlooking the mech bay floor. Below them, drones swarmed around the Atlas rig, performing diagnostics, while mechanics moved between towering machines beneath showers of welding sparks. For the first time in a long time, Richard Hale felt something unfamiliar settling into his chest. Not peace, maybe not even redemption, but purpose, and sometimes that was enough.